For 20 years or so, the United Kingdom has had unprecedented volumes of legal mass immigration. The floodgates were opened in 2004 by Tony Blair, and then after the years of Labour government, the Conservatives were elected 4 times with a promise to vastly reduce it down to tens of thousands. It never happened. In fact, net immigration in some years went up a lot. Kemi Badenoch, the current Conservative leader, admitted a few months back that we made mistakes in government. Well, no, this wasn't a mistake. It was a case of doing exactly the opposite of what they were elected to do. But this is not a video about a conspiracy theory. Instead, it's about explaining what those people in a democratic system have done undemocratically, and most importantly, why really they've done it.
Welcome to You Politics UK. This is something for the weekend.
To grasp why UK governments have enabled mass immigration, we first need to understand the problem. Let's start by looking at the growth of the UK population. In 1931, the UK population was 40 million. 40 years later, it had grown to 56 million. So quite a big difference. A growth of 3.3% every 5 years. And the population has kept climbing up to an estimated figure of a little less than 70 million people in 2025. From the year 2005, it's grown by 4.84% every 5 years on average. So it was unprecedented, but perhaps not to the extent that some people might have thought. What problems did this cause? Housing. We didn't build enough houses in the UK, so with an increasing population without enough housing, pushed up house prices and rental prices, making it less affordable. Infrastructure. Increased demand on roads, rail, motorways, increased demand on public services. Doctors' appointments, school places, hospital capacity, and depressed wages. In some sectors in particular, the influx of foreign skilled labour in the building industry, for example, depressed wage growth for people in the industry in the UK already. Now, all these problems are significant to many people and have become political issues. But what if there was an even bigger problem behind all this? Let's look at UK births historically. Well, in fact, this graph just shows England and Wales, but it'll have to do. If we look at the interesting bit here, there was what is known as the baby boom. From the 1950s and all the way through to the 1970s, the birth rate was relatively high. When I say relatively, I mean relative to where the birth rate is at now. This graph just shows the birth rate up to 2022, but it's falling even further now. Now, if we zoom in a bit and just look at the relevant period, and rather than looking at births, we look at fertility rate, we can start to see the problem. Now, just to explain, if you want a nation's population to remain static, without any net immigration, people coming in or going out factored in, then you need to maintain a fertility rate of roughly 2.1. In other words, you need 2 humans to create, on average, 2.1 babies. Why is it not just 2? Surely 2 people create 2 babies and so on and so on. Well, some people die early, so the 2.1 takes account of that, in simple terms. Okay, so what happens when you have a low fertility rate? And we have had since the 1980s. Well, this is where the big problem emerges. Imagine you've got all these people here retiring. So the problem is, you have all these people here retiring and an increasing number retiring, and they're on average living a bit longer than they used to. And there's no magic pot of money to pay for their state pensions. The government hasn't put anything away for a rainy day. Now, this is a really interesting graph. This really starts to show the problem. It's these people here, born from around 1960 to around 2005, everyone who's working age and paying taxes, that has to pay for those pensions and for lots of other things as well. The purple line shows the tax and the age groups who are paying it, and the orange and blue areas show where it's being spent, or the age groups it's being spent on. And with a declining birth rate or fertility rate, it amounts to the same thing, there are going to be less of those tax-paying people around in the future to pay those taxes, to pay those state pensions and for public services, whilst there are increasing numbers of people who need those pensions and public services. So, how big is this problem? In 2022, there were around 12.7 million people aged 65 or over in the UK. That's roughly 19% of the population. In 2042, 20 years later, there are projected to be 17.4 million people aged 65 or over in the UK. So that's a 37% increase. So what kind of difference does that make? Well, in the last financial year, government spending on what are called pensioner benefits, which are mainly pensions, was estimated at 138 billion. That's about 11.5% of all government spending on everything, including not just central government, but everything that local government spends as well. That's part of what is shown here as social protection. So if that goes up 37%, you see the problem. That's another 51 billion per year to be found. Let's look at public services. It's estimated that 42% of spending on health is spent on the 65 plus age group. If you visit any hospital, you'll see it. People need more healthcare when they're older. So 42% of the 245 billion spent on health is 102 billion. Add 37% to that and you have to find another 38 billion. So just on state pensions and health spending, you need to find another £89 billion per year. That's all based on today's prices, of course. It doesn't take into account any inflation. So what's the solution? Well, let's look at three options. One, massively encourage our existing population to have more children. So build more houses to reduce demand and hopefully make them more affordable. Perhaps have tax incentives for having more children. But the problem with that is that you're not going to get an increase in taxes until typically those children born now are around 19 or 20 years old, as this graph we looked at before shows. And you need to get over the hump now. Number two, you can have a big war, but only send the over 65s to fight. Okay, I apologise, that clearly is not a solution. So number three, well, why not import people who are going to pay taxes pretty much straight away and who are younger and not going to place a big burden on the state for welfare and public services for a long time? So that's why they're doing it. This is no mistake. It's deliberate and it's purposeful. In fact, if you look at the ONS population forecasts, they're forecasting increasing population. And that's not mainly due to the population living longer. It's mainly due to more net forecast immigration. Built into these forecasts are net immigration of another 340,000 people per year from 2028 onwards, every year. So that's what they're planning, regardless of what the politicians say, because they believe that is the only realistic way of generating enough tax revenues to get over the hump. Now, a couple of things spring to mind. The first one is that I said at the beginning of this video, this is not going to be a video about a conspiracy theory, and it's not. But I do think that what we've experienced is a conspiracy. There has been a conspiracy of near silence. Tony Blair never explained the problem. The Conservatives nor the Liberal Democrats, when they were in coalition, did either. Neither did the media. Instead, we were told that to question immigration was racist, that the problems we anticipated and then experienced as a result were not real. They were just a manifestation of prejudice. That's a pretty disgusting thing to do, to tell great swathes of your own population that they're racist and prejudiced for complaining about the side effects of a policy that was deliberately implemented without explanation. That's treating your electorate with contempt. It's also socially divisive. And it's not just political parties in the media. I looked at the website of a highly respected UK university just yesterday and found this quote: "There's no evidence that increased immigration has led to increased demand for housing. So apparently, according to one of our great centres of learning, all UK immigrants live in tents." Who knew? Perhaps we plebs are too stupid to understand the problem. But if you're still watching this, then you probably agree with me. It's not that difficult to understand. You just have to dig down and find the data, as I have. And that's what I really object to. In a democracy, you need to take people with you. When people understand the problem, they can then choose to vote for whoever they think has the best solution to overcome the problem. But if you don't, if you conspire to conceal the motive for doing the opposite of what you were elected to do, then you lose all credibility. If Kemi Badenoch really wonders why the Conservatives are in third place in the polls, and she's missing the point, it's not because of a mistake. Which brings me to the second thing that springs to mind. Reform UK have apparently gone soft on immigration, or that's the impression that some of the media and commentators seem to have got. Maybe the penny's dropped. Maybe Nigel Farage has concluded that without immigration he can't figure out a way through this, because now he's really understood the depth of the problem. Before, he was a party in various iterations who were not complaining about the real problem at the root of this, but were complaining actually about the side effects of the supposed solution. If that is the case, then I would suggest he needs to figure out how to generate a national conversation about the question. And the question, I suppose, is how are we going to pay for a dignified old age for those that have paid in all their lives without destroying the opportunities of the younger generations by crippling them with taxation and driving many of the best of them away? How do we get over the hump? Because if Nigel Farage doesn't, if he instead just continues the conspiracy, then people will see it and the chances are people will sense it and he will fail. So I hope that Nigel does understand that he needs a real plan for the country. He needs policy in depth and he has just about enough time to develop it. And he needs to have those conversations publicly, not try and come up with brilliant solutions behind closed doors, but engage the people, use the power of collective intelligence, which is really what democracy is all about. Without getting into the argument that Nigel Farage has been in over the last couple of weeks, realistically, Reform have got to where they are by being a protest party, by protesting about the effects of a policy that was adopted as an attempt to avoid a bigger problem. But now, we need to be realistic about the underlying problem and make people aware of it. And then perhaps work out, if we do need net immigration, then what kind of immigration we actually need to avoid social cohesion problems, to get effective integration, and so on. To consider all the impacts and come up with the best balanced solution. Anyway, this video is a long one already, so I won't try and come up with any solutions to the question that I've posed right now. But I would really appreciate it if you wish to share your thoughts on it in the comments. How do you think it needs to be dealt with? I'd love to hear your perspectives. There are always people with brilliant insights and ideas. So thanks for watching. Please do subscribe if you haven't done so already. And please do share this with as many people as you can, not just the video, but the message. The logic of what the problem actually is underlyingly here, so we can help move the debate forward. Until next time.